We are back with more Call of Duty League content. This is Ben Nissim, part of the flank with Zuma. Just released a video kind of wrapping up the season, going into the off season. So we'll just react to this and see what he's got to say.
This is the OpTic Texas contract situation heading into this offseason. So Illy's gone. He's been released. He's free to do whatever, and I'm sure we'll talk about him in a later video. Dan Gossi has a 1+1. Now, we'll get to sort of team comps and options in sort of a minute, but my personal thought is that they need to do everything in their power to get the team option on Dan. Even if you're not going to keep him next season, you can easily sell him. I think that Dan is a talented young player. I thought he was potentially their best play at the end of the season at Champs. Dan is still a kid. I think people need to understand this kid is just, in his rookie season. Like, I think some fans have crazy expectations for Dan. I've seen on social media and Twitter, like, he's still working on a lot of things, but he's a promising young kid who's got a lot of the right mindset on wanting to win, how to win, what to do to get there, and the gun skills there. So I just think if they can keep him, they should, because I just don't think you come across those players too often. And when you let them go, then you regret doing anything about that in the beginning. The Dashy one's a little bit interesting. So this is Jacob Hale's sheet, and I've got some conflicting info about Dashy's contract situation. Like, some people have told me that he's not a free agent, that he signed a new deal this season. I don't know. I've asked around. Nobody in OpTic really talks about Dashy's contract situation, so I have no idea if he's a free agent or not. I think in general, the only way that Bruce would leave is if OpTic said, "You're done. We don't want to run it back," and then he'll just tweet UFA. But like, even if he was a free agent this offseason, like, I don't think he's going anywhere. The only team I could see him going to is FaZe.
I disagree with that. I posted a video literally 2 days ago stating that I don't think OpTic wants to get rid of him. I think it's more in Dashy's court, as in if he wants to leave. As stated, like I said in the last video, he's gone through a lot of drama this season. He's poked at the fact how hard it is to play with OpTic, just because of the fan base. And when you win, you're at the highest high, but when you lose, you're at the lowest low. Whereas if he did get an offer from Atlanta FaZe or LA Thieves, a top contender team, obviously he's not going to go to a lower contender team, but if he gets an offer from them, I don't know why you'd at least talk to them, see what's going on. If OpTic did ended up re-signing him this season already, then that's out the door. But I will say, I think this truly comes down more on Dashy and his outlook with OpTic. I think it's similar. The analogy I would say is just being with that same girlfriend that you have the same problems with over and over and over again, and literally every conversation becomes drama. I think that's kind of like the relationship that Dashy has with OpTic. And I think it's really comes down more on him, and if he, maybe wants to just go try something new.
And I just don't think that's the route that they're going to go down. So I think Dashy's coming back and signing probably like a 2+1. Hook's on a 1+1, and I'll be.
Also, to expand off of that, Dashy is a top 3 AR in the game, but with all the free agents that you're going to see with AR players, OpTic could easily replace Dashy with just as good of an AR. I think that's the biggest thing here, is that if Dashy wanted to leave, I still don't think OpTic is in a bad place, because there's a lot of free agent ARs that would sign with OpTic in a heartbeat.
I'll be honest, they're probably not going to pick that up, and we'll get to that in a second. And Shotzi's locked in. He's there for a while. He's a cornerstone. Need Ant, I would say for him, this wasn't his best season of Call of Duty. I do think that next season there is room for opportunity there to get better, and I think that if he can improve on this season, I think they'll have a better chance of winning, because I don't think he played horrible this season, but I don't think it was his best season of Call of Duty. All right, so we're going to mess around with the sheet real quick. I made a copy of it, so I can kind of talk you through like what I think they might do team-wise. All right, so let's remove Indir, because he's gone. And I think Kyler as well, I think is also gone. I just think that the way this team played at the end of the season and Kyler's play style, like, I think you're going to get in a new SMG here. And that's going to be probably the main change you make, because I
think there's been a lot of hate towards Hook in his performance, and even in the videos that I posted this week, kind of seems that we were tearing Hook down as just this not great player. It's just because we're talking about OpTic is the reasoning behind this. There's so many SMGs like we were talking about with the ARs getting a top AR. I think it's the same thing with the SMG role. OpTic is a clear destination for any player in the CDL or in challengers that you can easily go find a replacement for Hook and get better at that role. I think that's Hook's gonna be in the league next year, and he's gonna go play for a team and be a big player for them. So I don't want to take away from the fact that he is a bad player. He's still a good player, but does he belong on a top 3 team? I don't know. It didn't work out for OpTic, so we'll see.
Just think Ant needs a better duo. I think they need to figure out how to get Ant comfortable and find the right complement around him. And I'm gonna go ahead and put Dashy back in here. I talk to people like I just don't see like where or why Dashy would leave. I think that the OpTic organization has a lot of loyalty to players like that that are a fan favorite, that grind for the values that the org has. I think they can still win with Dashy. I thought it was for at least from what I can tell and talking to people, was a good teammate. Now, if there's behind the scenes stuff that we don't know about and that's why they want to move on, I'm sure we'll find out. But at the moment, it doesn't seem like there's any. So I think he's coming back, and this basically leaves OpTic in a situation where they're making one change, and that is how they will get to a winning path. I think it's the best way to do it. It's the easiest path to do it. And for the sake of this video, we're going to go down that route. Now, I will say that as far as the pushing Dashy goes, like you would probably go after any sort of AR that's maybe available. A FaZe maybe move on from Austin. That's a great ad in that position. Sam Octane's a good ad in that position. I just think once you get to that, like beyond those two guys though, and we start talking about sort of the next tier guys, I just think at that point, it becomes easier to bring Dashy back. That's why I just think that they're going to look at that calculus and they're like, we're just going to make one change, maybe pick up a sub and fill it out. All right. So the first player y'all are going to want me to talk about in this spot is Pred. Obviously, the OpTic Pred stuff has been going on for like half a year now. I would love to know the count on the committed Call of Duty subreddit of the amount of threads about Pred and OpTic that have been made in the last 6 to 7 months. That would be hilarious, but I think this is probably their number one option now. The Pred situation, as far as I know, is as follows. I've asked people around the league, I've asked people on top teams, on teams that probably aren't going to get him, and sort of what you've heard about the Pred thing. And basically the sense I gotten is that he's basically obviously talking to all of the options that he wants to go to. They're kind of making their pitches, kind of, trying to explain like how it'd work over in that situation. And he's got to make a decision on who he's going to negotiate with. I am curious sort of what Pred's clock is on that, because if I were him, like there's no rush, right? Once I decide what team I'm going on, like as much as I would love to know the other teams in Roster Mania, and they're all going to kind of wait on this decision, like he should do what's best for him. And I think more importantly, like it really comes down to, I think, 3 options. OpTic is best for his brand growth, like building yourself as a player. A bunch of his friends, former teammates are also in Dallas. He was in Dallas this season when he was playing on Seattle, so he doesn't really need to like move. So it's pretty straightforward. Add in the OpTic team. Obviously, that comes with additional pressure. I think trying to figure things out with Shotzi isn't going to be the easiest, because they both kind of want to play similar spots and roles, but so they would both have to really, really work hard to figure it out, but I think they can do it. I think the next option, or maybe like a 1A, 1B thing, because I think it's almost like
Explain that in the video this week. They are a very similar player as far as just being annoying, being in spots that you wouldn't normally see a player. Pred is the laydown king. Both very, very good at their role, but do they play well on the same team?
like there's sort of pros and cons to both, is going to be Atlanta FaZe. Because I think that if we scroll up here real quick, let's say hypothetically for this, like they are going to go ahead and they're not going to play with Austin. We'll go ahead and we'll move them from this list. I just think you look at the 3 teams, and if we're talking about like pure consistency and the ability to win, like FaZe is going to be your best chance of like collecting cash, having the best chance to win events. That's going to be a squad you go to. Now, the downside with FaZe is they're not OpTic, Atlanta FaZe, in terms of like the brand growth and like all the subs you're going to get and fans. So like you got to make a decision, I think, between those 2 teams about, are you trying to, kind of really think super long term as far as brand growth? Winning is important, but not as important as sort of like setting yourself up long term. Or are you trying to go to Atlanta FaZe and win, you'll probably be on an amazing team. You can probably help these guys get their next ring and really cement like the dynasty conversation. You were a part of that, like part of one of the best teams of all time. And then, yeah, you can probably still do all the brand growth stuff on FaZe. You just don't have the OpTic fans necessarily behind you, but you can still do the long-term planning. So I don't know what Pred wants to do. I don't know like what decision or what's kind of important to him between both kind of avenues. So for now, it's an option. I think OpTic's one of his top options. He hasn't made a decision yet, and I'm sure we'll find out at some point, hopefully this week. But I mean, he can really take almost as much time as he wants here.
Okay, the issue with Pred taking as much time as he wants, if his decision making is down between OpTic and Atlanta FaZe, let's say FaZe and OpTic have both offered him a contract. Let's say it's very similar numbers. That's where he can take his time because he can fall back on those contracts that have already been offered to him. But let's say another big player like LA Thieves comes into play. I don't know if it's necessarily the smartest thing to, or let's say any other team outside of OpTic and FaZe. Let's say you're hearing all options. Maybe OpTic and FaZe don't offer you a contract. I think you'd want to sign with another team as fast as possible. And the reason being is that majority of all these teams are blowing it up. I mean, outside of New York, OpTic, FaZe, and possibly Minnesota, even though there's been rumors about, two of those guys leaving. Those are the teams that are probably going to stay around the same teams, right? Like you might trade in one guy or trade out, two guys, but the main pieces are there. The foundation is there. If Pred doesn't get an offer or doesn't take the offer from OpTic or FaZe, I think it's in his best decision making to sign with a team. Let's say a team like Minnesota, or even if he stays with Seattle. Let's just take those teams for instance. It would be best for him to sign as soon as possible. That way that team can then build around him and he can have a say within the organization of, let's go after this guy, or I play well with this guy. That if he's going to be a team guy and a guy that's going to go out on a limb, and let's say he stays with Seattle and he is kind of their rock and their foundation, it would be smart for him to sign earlier rather than later. That way he has a say as in how the team is going, what the team's going to be. I think we've seen a lot of this with Shotzi and Scump on OpTic. I mean, these are the guys that are running the teams, right? Like without Shotzi, I don't think OpTic ever goes and picks up Hook. Like Shotzi definitely made that recommendation. They've played together before. They've played well and have performed well before in previous seasons. So if I'm Pred and I'm not going to sign with OpTic or FaZe, or I don't get a contract offer from OpTic or FaZe within the next month, I think you sign with another team as fast as possible. That way you have the opportunity to then make that team and put the pieces around you that you want, or at least just have a say, right? Like none of these smaller tier teams are going to pick up Pred and then pay him $400,000 a year to then not listen to him with the pieces that he wants around him. And maybe it's not, hey, we can't go get Octane as your AR, but here's 4 other guys that we can offer a contract to that's within our budget or within our range of what we're looking for. And Pred can then go make and help that decision making.
To make the decision.
What's up, guys? My name is Mike, and
What's up,
I'm
Mike?
here to get stoned.
How you
Today,
doing?
I'm
He's
here
getting
to try
stoned.
the Hero Dose.
He's getting faded.
I think the next player that might be very interesting in this spot is the return of the Dark Prince, and that is Envoy. Obviously,
Posted a video earlier this week. Envoy is the guy for them. I think hands down makes the most sense.
on LA Thieves, they had kind of a rough season this year, and we'll get to them sort of later on this week, but very kind of interesting roster situation. I'm not really sure what direction at the moment they're going to go in. Now, Envoy is, as far as I know, a free agent, so he can talk to whoever he wants. And I think just like Pred, I've asked around, like he's definitely getting a lot of offers. because people like his work ethic, his ability on the map. He's a very good search player. Like, there's just a lot that he brings as a package. So I think the reunion with him with the OpTic guys is definitely a real possibility. I think the duoship that he can have with Ant is going to be really good. I think they're both players who are willing to kind of not always head smash as far as where the action is on the map and take some routes to the outer lanes and try and make plays to set up your team. So I really like the flexibility with the squad.
This is what was missing from this team all year. Shotzi, for you to get the best out of Shotzi, you need to let Shotzi do whatever he wants to do, which means that your second SMG player needs to play a little bit reserved, watch the main lanes in which SMGs play, and be more of just a team player on the map instead of going rogue, as in what Shotzi likes to do.
I like sort of their ability to play search. I think Envoy would do all of like the dirty work stuff that Ant doesn't need to do, like, you know, run bombs and defaults. You know, if God forbid both subs are like bump and hill, like maybe Envoy's the one that stays and Ant goes. Like, there's just a lot that they could do, and I think they would be a really good duo. So if he doesn't stay at Thieves, if OpTic doesn't get pred, I could see Envoy definitely going to OpTic. I think the last player, and I really only think the OpTic has three like top tier options that don't require like buying someone out, is this player. Kismet, obviously Kiz, just coming off a victory with the New York subliners at Champs. So I really think that New York's going to stick. That's why I have this one last. But I think Kiz would be a great add to this team. Like, he's already getting, just like with Pride, already in Dallas. So switching to OpTic, not that big of an issue. I think he's got the kind of fire that I think will work really well with the players in this team in terms of like the passion that he has. He's a really unselfish player. Just, again, like the thing with Envoy, like Kiz will do the stuff that Ant doesn't want to do. And I think the most important thing for OpTic figuring out how to get the best out of Ant next season. I like this ad. I just don't see this happening because I don't think Kiz is going to leave a team that just won champs. That's crazy. Pretty much every time that people win champs, they stick. I can't think of maybe major roster decisions when we have started having end of year champs that anyone ever bolted. So I just, as much as this makes sense, I just don't think it's going to be hard to happen unless some crazy stuff goes down in WrestleMania. I think
Okay, the whole Kismet thing, I mean, Ben alluded to it at the end there. Like, why would he leave? But also, why would the organization let him leave after they just won champs? The only thing that I can think of is that Hydra is rumored to have the biggest contract in CDL history as far as being a young player that a team paid, maybe outside of Scump. But yeah, there's no way that organization lets Kismet go. And as far as his performance in what he's done this season, he's played his role probably the best out of any SMG player. As far as being a guy that's just running straight at you. When you look at guys like Hydra or Simp or even Shotzi, I mean, these are guys that they make space on the map because of the routes that they take. They're not necessarily always in front of your face. I would say Kismet is almost like a level up from Hook, whereas Kismet can do the things that Hook kind of struggled at doing at times this year. But I don't think there's really any reason to throw that out there because I just don't see him leaving New York. A, wanting to leave New York, and B, why would the organization let him go? Unless it was coming down to money because they've already paid Hydra.
We're starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel. I'm going to kind of toss out one more name that I think is a crazy, unrealistic option. But I think it's fun to speculate. And I think, you know, if it got to this, I think maybe they would try and figure it out. And I think it's this player. I know he only just played a champ, Snoopy. He's a super young player, just like with Dan. You're bringing in someone that, like, is coming in as just a complete like clean slate, and you're gonna really have to work to build a player like this. But if for some reason OpTic whiff on every option, there's a possibility they try to go to Boston and buy out Snoopy. Obviously, this kid is crazy talented. I just think the problem with this move, and I watch him play, is that like he still has a lot to learn. Again, it's kind of hard to judge things because it was like one event, it was champs, and so you really want to see him with a full offseason. But there's a lot of things that like very experienced players have experienced that this kid who's 18 have not, as far as like what happens in a big match, the composure, you know, making sure you check corners, making sure you do your tactics. Like if you're picking up Snoopy and you run this team, you gotta like know that this is not a you're gonna absolutely fry a major one type team. Like it's gonna take a sec to circle around. That's why I'm putting this in sort of the like dream, a dream kind of tier. Like because I just think it's a cool option. I just don't think the buyout is going to be worth it, and B, I don't think it's going to get here in terms of actually having to make this type of thought process. So yeah, that's really my thoughts on OpTic. I think they are going to ideally probably keep the trio together and pick up a sub, or maybe like one of these ARs goes down and then maybe they do some kind of pick up a combo of players from Thieves. I guess theoretically, right? If we wanted to get kind of crazy with this, like if you wanted the last thing you can do, right? Last thing for this video, like we can do this and say like we want to commit to this team. I actually really like this. This team would be insane in search. Dan doesn't need to worry really about ever potentially having to pick up a sub unless it becomes like a 4-sub hill or a 4-sub game. Draws is kind of your flex guy. Him and Envoy had really good chemistry, have won events together. And this team would just be insane in search and be like a search first team. And they're kind of matching sort of phase and I think even New York now is becoming like very good at search, being search focused. Like I just think that skill in this team would be good. I just don't know if the Envoy Draza duo is a thing that exists out there. I haven't asked to see if they're kind of going to roster mania as a double, but I can see this option if for some reason they decide to get rid of one of the ARs. I think for the sake of this, look, I just think that it's going to really come down to this situation, right? We're going to put Dashy back in the squad. And I think that this is basically where OpTic's trying to end up, is with this kind of combination, and we see between Envoy and Pred which one they actually land to make their team whole for next season. All right, let me know in the comments what you guys think of the video. Like, if
I know this isn't really a factor for OpTic, but let's just say hypothetically it is. They're already paying Shotzi a shit ton of money. They have to be. They're already paying Dashy, especially if he gets extended and is staying on this team next year. They're probably paying Dashy a pretty big bag. You probably have a pretty cheaper contract with Ghosty. Imagine if you add Pred into that mix. You now have a roster between 3 players with Dashy, Pred, and Shotzi that are probably making upwards of, I mean, you have to think that they're probably paying $1 million a season just for those 3 players. And maybe that's faded for me to say, but I mean, Shotzi's clearly getting a bag. There were rumors that Hydra, MVP of the year, was getting paid $500,000 a season. There are rumors that Scump was getting paid $1 million a season. Obviously, with Scump, you get the content, side of things. So I think that contract's a little bit different. But you got to imagine if Pred is going to sign to a team, I mean, he's going to be looking for a similar bag. I mean, we're probably looking at somewhere close to Hydra. I mean, maybe even if you cut it in half, that's $250,000 a year. Shotzi's probably making upwards of $300,000 a year. And then who knows what Dashy's getting paid, but it's probably around the same numbers. I mean, we're talking about Dashy, one of the best ARs in the game. We're talking about Pred, top 3 SMG in the game, most likely. And then Shotzi as just being that young talent, raw skill. He's obviously huge when it comes to content as well. He's really blown up. He's really put an effort into that. I mean, you just got to think, this is a very, very expensive roster right here. All right, good video from Ben. He didn't really hit on the Draza and Envoy thing all that much as far as the rumors that came out about that, but if you guys want to check that out, I posted a video about it already, speaking on my thoughts. Yeah, appreciate everybody for watching. Thank you.